This episode is titled The Problem with Perfection, a reflection on perfectionism by a perfectionist. What is perfectionism? How does it impact our lives? And what can we do to reduce it for our work with kids? Welcome to the Andy Jacks Podcast, a reflection on education, leadership, and life. Please consider hitting that like button, sharing with others, and letting me know what you think. It only took me 37 recordings to make this episode. That's not true, but it definitely did not take me one take. I don't think anything ever takes me one take. And if you're a perfectionism, you know what that feels like. But eventually I got it done. And I'm maybe a perfectionist, but I'm also very, the nice way to put that is persistent. Other people may say stubborn, but either way, I get it done. Guillermo del Toro says, in the end, perfection is just a concept, an impossibility we use to torture ourselves, and that contradicts nature. Oh, I love that word torture. So true. Gloria Steinem says, perfectionism is internalized depression. Wow. You know, for me and for so many others out there, perfectionism is such a brutal personality characteristic. And I would know I was born with this, but it haunts me every day, especially on things that I really care about or things I really want to do well. It's just there. It reminds me of like a horror movie, like, you know, back in the day, like an 80s horror movie or something, where you have this bad guy, you know, with a mask and a knife coming at you. And no matter how far you run and how fast you run away, this bad guy's slowly, steadily creeping up on you. Before you know it, it's right there on top of you. And you'd even realize maybe you're being a perfectionist. And all of a sudden, oh, yeah, I just realized I wasted like hours of my life. And, you know, my anxiety is high and I'm taking my time away from other things I should be doing. And many of you listening are thinking, yeah, been there, done that. And this is not me telling you how to do this right necessarily. This is a little bit of here's what not to do. But when you get that level of anxiety from perfectionism, you realize the impact that it can have on your own well-being as well as how you sort of relate to others. But are you a perfectionist or not? You may not know this. So let's have a little bit of test. You might be a perfectionist if. Okay, so let's see about this. If you look at the restaurant menu for so long and you still can't decide what to order, that you end up asking the waiter or waitress what to order, you're that indecisive, you might be a perfectionist. If you create a spreadsheet to compare different pros and cons of possible clothing, you know, that you may want to buy on Amazon, you might be a perfectionist. If your stress increases exponentially the more time you have to get something done, because it makes you work on it even that much more time, you know, time sometimes is your enemy, you might be a perfectionist. If you work on a project for a long time, but get so frustrated that it's not coming together the way you want it to, you just give up on the whole thing altogether, you might be a perfectionist. And lastly, if you have an emotional outburst when you think something isn't quite good enough, it's not there yet, it could be better, even when everyone else around you is saying it's good enough, you might be a perfectionist. And if you know me well, you're like, yeah, that's you, Andy. Yep, that's you. And of course, I got to watch out because I want things to be their best. And I, you know, see things that could be changed, but there's always things that could be better, always things that could be changed. But to what end? To what end do you get stuck, right? You just get stuck with not actually moving forward. And I wanted to start with this idea of perfectionism because that's ultimately what ends up holding me back from trying something new or being better at whatever I'm doing. You know, I think there's times where we want to do the best job we can, but there's also times where we just got to do more things and get more stuff done because that ultimately is going to have a bigger impact. So let's talk about some things to think about with perfectionism and what we can maybe do instead of that. Maybe some, I don't know, I don't want to say lessons I learned the hard way. One is this idea of perfectionism. It has this price, right? There's a price in time. It takes time away from you because the more podcast episode takes, or the more that you are playing with something, it takes time away from other things. I remember one time sitting in my office and I was working on this spreadsheet. We were going through like your typical like RTI model of having students in tiers, and each student had a cell with their progress and their characteristics that they were having and behaviors. And I was color coding these cells, and I was going through this Excel formula to make sure that each cell was color coded a certain way. I can remember this moment, sitting in my office and try to make these cells the right thing right in the middle of the school day. And as I'm sitting there, I found a name, and something hit me about this name. And I thought to myself, what in the heck am I doing? Why am I sitting here in this office doing this instead of actually being there with this kid? I'm spending all this time in my office trying to make this spreadsheet perfect for who? To what end? Like, why? Why does this need to be perfect? This doesn't need to be perfect in any way whatsoever. What would be more perfect if I was spending that time with that child right now instead of analyzing the progress of that child and made it look nice with the color coding. So I literally remember shutting off my computer and just left. And I had no plan. I just left and I had to go meet with that kid. And I never forgot that. And I still face that problem. I still get into that problem. But if you're kind of like that, where you're so worried about the color coding of your cells in your spreadsheet that you don't actually work on the kids that are in your spreadsheet, that's another one. You might be a perfectionist. And to what end? So always ask that question, what's your goal from this? To what end are you spending all this time and energy on this? And what else is it taking away? What's the cost of that? Is that cost that it's taken away from your family? Hours at night you're spending on these projects? I've been there, right? Is the cost that you are just putting so much emotional and physical energy into something that's taken your health away from you, your well-being? Been there too. you know is the cost that you don't get other things done that you have to get done, like in your job or in your life. You have projects you have to get done, but because you're so stressed about getting this one thing right, that you end up not getting like any of it done. Well, that happens, right? Well, part of the thing to think about is, one, accepting mistakes, right? Accepting the fact that we are human and we make mistakes and nothing we do is perfect. It's like art. If you've ever made art, like a drawing or artwork in class or something, I've always hated the way my art looked. I felt like no matter what I did, it was like I could never hang my art on the wall. Could you imagine that? I could definitely put other people's art on the wall. I think your art always looks mistaken to yourself. I think it's always flawed in your own mind because you see those imperfections. It's just because ingrained in your psychology. Other people see that art and they think, wow, that's amazing. That is so amazing. I'm going to put it on the wall because it really inspires me. So I have to really be careful the fact that, like, no matter what I see, I'm always going to see the flaws first. When I work with teachers, I'll always ask them at the beginning of, like, at the end of observations, I will be talking and we'll say, okay, how'd that lesson go? Almost always teachers will say things like, oh, I didn't do this, or I could have done that, or I didn't like this. They will always go to the flaws they saw in a lesson first. And I have to remind them, no, this was a great lesson. Like, you did a great job. No, what did you do great first? And I think I need to, like, even change the question order to say, okay, what did you do great? Because I think we are also naturally inclined to look at the mistakes that we made and bring those out first. It's like this like, I don't know if it's a therapy or if it's this thing about, I'm going to tell you what I did flawed in first before you tell me, because it's like emotionally harder if I hear it from you versus I like throw it out there first. But we have to accept these mistakes and accept that the process is flawed as much as we are flawed. It reminds me of, in a weird way, of I always bring back sports analogies. It reminds me of like a golf game. If you've ever played golf, you probably have a love-hate relationship with golf. And so, when you're playing golf, there's a certain relaxation that you have to have with the swing to do it right. I remember going up, we were at a golf tournament, and I've always been a very nervous golfer. And I go up to, I think I was teeing off first, and there's all these people watching over at this really fancy golf course. And so all I kept thinking was, not how amazing this course was, not how beautiful it was, not how awesome of an experience this was, but no, all I kept thinking was how embarrassed I was going to be swinging this golf club. Because I'm good at sports, but golf has not been my game. So I'm sitting there about to tee off, and all I can think about is, oh man, people are watching me, and I better grip this thing the right way, and I got to line my feet up the right way, and I got to straighten my back and do all these things. And you know what I end up doing? I end up slicing this ball. I hit it at least. That was good. But I sliced it so far to the right. A slice is when you hit it and it kind of veers off to the right. It was like, I think it was on another golf course. It was so far off. It went into the water. And literally, I did everything I was nervous about doing. The stress I had caused me to do the thing I was most fearful about doing. When in golf, the reality of golf is you have to actually be very relaxed as a golfer. You have to hold the club almost to the point of letting it go. It's so loose in your hands. And when you swing back, you can't think about how you're swinging back. You have to literally just pull back and then kind of rip it and twist those hips. If you play golf a lot, there's a certain magic to that. And if you think about it too much, you're going to screw it up. So there's a certain looseness in that. And I think life is sort of like that with perfectionism, that you have to have a little bit of a looseness to what you do and know that there's going to be a little bit of a wiggle room to have mistakes in there. But ultimately, your goal is heading in the right direction. In schools, I really think about how much time we spend on meetings and how effective are we in meetings. And I think about that with my own time as well. So do I use my time wisely? Am I efficient and effective? There's both are important. When we have behaviors in our school, and something I really focus on as educator is how we support our most struggling students and how we provide interventions for them and how we help them make progress. But ultimately, what I find with that sort of area of school improvement is that we, because it's so stressful and because it's such a difficult thing, we almost need a stress reliever in talking and sharing. And it's good. I think venting's good, to a point when it's private and it's, with your friends. But when your venting turns into the meeting and you have no plan for the meeting, you end up just wasting a lot of time, which creates more stress and more frustration. Because ultimately, I don't think we have a plan for planning. We don't have a plan for how we're going to talk together and plan for improvement. We just go in there because we're rushed and we want to get done because we're sort of aggressive about it. We got to get this done. We got to do something. Well, doing something's good, but doing something that is not methodical and thoughtful can be actually take you backwards and be very damaging. And especially when you get to that point and you don't like the outcome of it, you have to start this whole thing over again. So if it's planning for a meeting, you have to make sure that what you're doing in that meeting is intentional and that each item is there to take you to your ultimate goal. If you're trying to plan for standards, if you're trying to plan for behaviors, what behaviors do I want? And then work backwards from there. How will I get those behaviors? How will I know when those behaviors are coming? And ultimately, what will I do for that student once they get them? How that celebration kind of work. So just running in and doing something is not really how to fix being a perfectionist, because the reality is once you do it, you're not going to like the outcomes anyways. So having a plan for planning, and if you're trying to plan a project or do something on your own, having a plan for that too. How much time should I spend planning something? Is the time worth the investment of whatever that thing is to get done? Some things are little things. You don't need to spend a lot of time. Some things are really important, big things, and you do have to spend more time planning and practicing and getting ready for it. So really making sure that you match your planning with the intended goal or how important that goal is, or, what you want to get out at the end of that, and really focusing on that one thing and not multitasking. That idea of multitasking is such a myth. You can only really do one thing effectively at a time. I think we spend so much time making something perfect that we forget the progress that is being made in the meantime. And ultimately, if you have a large, goal or project or something you're really trying to attain, you get stuck with this idea. I want it to be that thing I see way down the road, like the vision about what success is. But what you don't realize is no one gets there, right? Everyone takes little steps to get to that point. You don't just jump to that success. Even those people you see are highly successful, they can just get there. You started with very little changes and small improvements. There's a saying, a term in Japanese called kaizen, which is improvement with small steps. That every day continuous improvement. You ask small questions, you think small thoughts, you take small actions, you ultimately solve small problems in your life. Like that old expression, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. The big goals we have, big improvements are scary and we run from them or we freeze up with this paralysis. But by chunking these down, maybe to small pieces over time, we can help alleviate that stress and that need for it all to be that perfect version of what we think that will be. But it also builds momentum because as you make these little sort of checkpoints or little pieces of progress over time, you see that you're actually getting in the right direction. It makes you feel good about yourself and the progress you're being made. And I think with students, we forget that. We want them to be, let's say, behaved. We want them to be so much better behaved than where they are now, that we have this vision about what they should be and compare them to others. And we forget to celebrate maybe the very minuscule little things that they do that is going in the right direction. We don't appreciate the things they're doing right, and we just overanalyze and overthink all those mistakes that they're making and think that they're not making any progress whatsoever, but they really are. And it takes such a long time for kids to make progress that we have to slow down and think about those little things that they're doing right and the improvements that they are making, and see that the work that we are doing with them is really having an impact on them, even if it's this not massive change overnight. So slowing down, seeing those things get better, celebrating each and every one of those improvements will help that sort of reduction of if it's not perfect, it's not good enough, and we should just give up on the whole thing. Because that's what ends up happening in education all the time. It's not what we want. It's not there yet. Said, fine, I'm not going to do anything because it's not working. No, have faith that what you're doing is making a difference, even if it's such a small little difference every single day. Susanna Reeves says there's a difference between obsessive perfectionism and taking time to create something that is the best you can offer. Knowing what needs to be better and stretching to improve yourself is what separates the mediocre from the marvelous. I think it's such a good thing to have high expectations, and not being a perfectionism or not being a perfectionist doesn't mean that you should just lower your standards. That's not at all what this is about. But again, if your high expectations of yourself and ultimately of others cost too much, of your own time, your own well-being, your own relationships with others, that it's definitely too high of a price and it's not worth it. Vince Lombardi says perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. And I love that idea of chasing perfection, but ultimately only if knowing that the chase is not attainable. You'll get high and you'll get really great results, but you have to have that back of your mind knowing that it's not going to be there all the way perfect. So chase it down, chase it like just a beast, get after it, do the best you possibly can. Don't have this low standard just because you don't want, to worry about being a perfectionist. But what are you going to do at the end of the day to know that this is good enough and I got to move forward with it? Because there's so many problems with perfectionism. But when it comes to kids who are doing our best, we cannot settle for anything less than the best we possibly can offer them every single day. If we want them to be different or we want us to be different, we have to actually do different. We have to do different things. If we want them to change their emotions or change our own emotions, we can't just say, hey, feel better, right? No, you have to actually create new things in your lives, new actions in our lives to help ultimately affect those emotions down the road. So sometimes the only way to get out of our heads is to do different actions every day to put us in a better frame of mind to ultimately make ourselves feel better. When you think about perfectionism, when you think about your own flaws, think about those things you can do just a little bit better, knowing that we're not perfect and it's okay. In fact, I think we're pretty suspicious of people that look perfect. So hopefully you found a lot of flaws in this episode because I'm definitely not there. And I appreciate all those people around me that can hold me accountable and help me be a better person every day. Ultimately, believe in yourself and be the best version of you. You have so much to offer this world, and your best is good enough to make a difference in the world around you. That wraps up this episode. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at _AndyJax. Check out my website, andyjax.com, to sign up for my updates and blog posts. A quick book update. I don't know if you know I'm running a book, something that's been on my bucket list for so long. And this week I worked on the title and the book cover, nailing that down. And again, I'm trying not to be a perfectionist here, but it was really cool to see that come to life because there's something really powerful about that book cover. And I can't wait to share it with you. We're so close, but that'll be coming out soon. The book is all about how we reach and teach all of our students, even when things get tough, because I know we got this. Education is the foundation of a better society for ourselves and our kids in the future. And I'm so proud of the work we do in education. I think it's so important to share all the good things happening out there. Only through being together in this journey and supporting each other can we do the best we can for our kids. Have a great day, everybody. Go get after it.